Hello, welcome to the Suburban Appalachia channel, and today I'm going to demonstrate and make a video on how I make my biscuits. And I encourage any of you that's ever been intimidated by making or doing bread baking, biscuits are one of the easiest things you can do. It may seem intimidating, but I assure you, if I can do it, you can do it. And I was going to show you some tips and pointers that I picked up over the years, and show you this delicious biscuit recipe. And here in the Blue Ridge Mountains, that biscuits are a staple of all three meals, or used to be, and I wanted to share it with you. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to reposition the camera. My head may be out of the video, but I want you to really see how we make this, and I encourage you to try it. Well, we're ready to get started. I position the camera now so you can see what I'm doing instead of seeing the whole picture. But I have here a mixing bowl, and the first thing we want to do is put 3 cups of self-rising flour, and this has been one of my favorite biscuit flours. It's called Virginia's Best, and unfortunately they're closing down, and we just have a few bags left. The milling company up at Elston, Virginia has manufactured this flour locally, and it's been so good, but we're on our last few bags. But we're going to use self-rising. We're going to add to this. We're going to put 3 cups of self-rising flour, unsifted, just level cups. No need to be exactly precise, because the way we make our biscuits, it all works out measurement wise, and you'll see what I mean as we go on. And I encourage you to try this recipe. Very easy. So I have in the bowl 3 cups of self-rising flour. And self-rising flour, even though this is fresh, it sets around, and that's why you have inconsistent results when you make biscuits. Some of them won't rise, some of them, one biscuit will rise and the other one won't. And to make this biscuit richer, taste richer, it's already got salt and baking powder in it because it is self-rising flour. But I like to add to it, and you'll see what happens. I like to add an extra half a teaspoon of salt. And then to that self-rising flour, I'm going to add an additional 2 teaspoons of baking powder, just regular baking powder. And be sure it's fresh, or you won't get the same results. I've got salt, a half a teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, and I'm going to mix all that in together. Very easy. You just want to incorporate that in. Okay? And this is not exact. People make rocket science out of baking, and it doesn't have to be that way. Now, the next step, after you've got your flour, baking soda, or baking powder rather, and salt, you want a 1/4 cup of vegetable shortening, and I just use my hands, and it looks like a 1/4 cup. And so the next thing we'll do is we'll give it a little more, take your hands like so, and incorporate the shortening into the flour. And you can feel it. You take your hands and do a rubbing motion like so, and you keep incorporating that in and rubbing it all together and mixing it all together until you get little lumps of shortening mixed into your flour. And it takes just a little bit of time to do, but it's delicious. It makes such a good biscuit. Okay. When you get to that consistency, you can see down in the bowl you're about right. Okay, now the next thing we do, even though we've got shortening in it, I add 1.5 to 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil. Something about like so, and again, not an exact measurement, because the way we do this, it all works out. Okay, now I'm going to add to this mixture. I'm going to start out with a cup of buttermilk, cultured, and I buy the whole fat buttermilk. Don't buy the fat-free. You won't get the same results. And so I'll start off with 1 cup of buttermilk. Now some people say, oh, I don't like buttermilk. Well, I'm going to tell you, if you don't drink buttermilk, it's delicious in making biscuits. So I'm going to start out simple. Just pour it right over the top. Now I'm going to take a spoon. You can use your hands for this. But I'm going to take a spoon and I'm going to start stirring this up. And you can always add to it. Some methods of making biscuits, you in a big bowl of flour and you have a lot of flour left. This method, you use everything that's in your bowl pretty much. And you can see it start coming together. And I can see down in the bottom, I've still got a little bit of dry mixture left. And so what I'll do is I'll pick the buttermilk back up and I'll continue to add just about maybe 2 tablespoons at a time till I get to where I'm at, where I need to be. And if you get to the point that you think your dough's too wet, I'll show you how to fix that. And that's what I usually do. It's kind of sticky on the outside. That's okay. I come back and I get the flour and I sprinkle some extra on top. And I'll roll it around in the bowl. And while I've been putting these biscuits together, I've got the oven preheated to 400 degrees. So preheat your oven to 400 degrees before you get started. Okay, and that's what you're looking for. That's the way you want it to look, about like that. Okay, now we're ready to put it out, and here I have a mat. And don't be afraid to use plenty of flour. We're going to roll this out onto our mat here. And this method, you use everything that's there. You don't have any flour wasted. It all goes into the biscuit, and that's why I like this method. And these biscuits are old-timey tasting. They work. And through the years of trial and error, this is what's worked for me. Okay, now, here's what makes a fluffy biscuit. Some people disagree, but you need to knead your dough. And you start it out, it's pretty soft, as you can see. Let's see if I can get on down a little further. There we go. It's soft, but you want to keep folding it. See what I'm doing with my hands? I'm folding it over on top of itself. And you'll do this 5, 6, 7 times, and you'll know when you get ready where it's at. It starts to stiffen up, but you need to fold, and I'll pick the dough up. You need to fold it over on itself and press down. Some people make biscuit in dough boards, dough bowls. This is always what's worked for me. And that extra salt will give it a richness. The vegetable oil will give it an extra richness. But that baking powder will give it an additional lift. And that buttermilk is delicious in biscuits. So if you don't drink buttermilk, I encourage you to use it in your baking. It's delicious. Okay, now if you look, see when I take my hand, my fingers, and poke in, it kind of pokes back out. You're right, it's not sticky anymore. But it's important to work your dough to get flaky, layered biscuits. And I guarantee you can do this. Now I'll take a rolling pin, and I want to mention that this was made by my wife's great uncle Eck, and they were some of the original, her family was some of the original settlers in Grayson County. And he made her this rolling pin many years ago, and it was made on one of the old-fashioned spring pole lathes, and it means a lot to my wife, and she lets me use it in making biscuits. But we're ready to start rolling these out, and what we're going to do, we're going to roll these out till they're about, I don't know, 1/4 to 3/8 thick. It's already making me hungry. I can smell the buttermilk. But I wanted to share this recipe. It's very easy to do. And here, some people pinch biscuits off with their hand. Some people cut them, and I prefer to cut them. And I have a biscuit cutter. You can use an old tin can. And so what I'll do is I'll go around here and I'll cut these biscuits out. And then I'll take the dough and remove it from around the biscuits. And we'll roll this back up and continue making more biscuits. So we'll use every bit of this. Might be a little bit left. But over here I have a baking pan. And I'll take, I encourage you to use a light colored baking pan. That way the bottom of your biscuits won't burn. Because we just put them on there. There's enough oil and shortening in the biscuits that we don't need to add to it. We don't need to add anything to it. You can use baking spray if you'd like. But these shouldn't stick. And I'll continue on with the dough that's here. And that's again, there's the dough that's left from the first cut. And you'll fold it over on itself 4 or 5 times and it'll put it all back together. Something about like so. Then I'll go back to my rolling pin. Roll this out. So it's about 1/2 inch to 3/8. You can experiment depending on what size biscuit you want. And then we'll cut more biscuits. So there we got 4 more. And here in the mountains, biscuits, as we said, have been a staple of food for many years. And they're just so easy to make, and it's a taste of home. And I'm sure some of you all that's watching remember your grandparents making biscuits and how you enjoyed them. And see, we got this dough left, so I want you to try this easy recipe. The key things is remembering to fold your dough, and we'll make one more. I'll put that on the baking sheet. Mike can get another one. And sometimes these biscuits at the end don't turn out quite symmetrical, but that's okay. Okay. For most 3 cups of flour, the diameter of the cutter that I used, I made 14 biscuits. As you can tell, these are a little bit smaller, but that's okay. Now, to get your biscuits to be beautiful and brown on the top, what you want to do is get you some vegetable oil. And I usually use the cap that's on the bottle. And what I'll do is I'll drizzle a drop or two and take my finger and I'll rub the oil over the top. And once you get your finger wet, you can do several biscuits at a time. They're so good and they're so easy. Don't be intimidated by making bread. If you want to make bread, biscuits are one of the easiest breads you can make, and your family will love them. And they're good with gravy. And later on, we're going to have an American mountain breakfast special. We're going to show you some of the old mountain breakfasts, and we still eat them today. But these biscuits are delicious with gravy. They're delicious to slice them open while they're warm and put butter in them. This time of year, we've got homegrown tomatoes. They're delicious to slice them open, put some real butter in there and a slice of tomato and salt and pepper. It's absolutely delicious. But as you can see, we're ready to go in the oven. And we're going to bake these at 400 degrees for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to look at them. And it may take up to 12 minutes. And we're about 3,000 feet up, and depending on where you live, the baking time will be more or less depending on where you live. But for us, about 12 minutes, but I like to keep a check on them. So we're going to put these in the oven, and when they're finished baking, we'll be back and I'll show them to you. Hello, we're back, and as you can see, the biscuits are done. There's the bottom and there's the top. And our oven upstairs bakes them in about 12 minutes. The oven downstairs here, it took about 14 minutes, and it'll depend on where you're at. But they're beautiful biscuits, a very easy recipe, and with that oil on top, made them brown. But let me say, if your oven, after about 12 to 14 minutes, your bottoms are the brownness that you desire, and the tops are not brown, put your oven on broil and set a timer for about a minute or 2 minutes, and it'll finish them off beautiful on the top. And as you can see, the biscuits are hot and flaky. You can see the steam coming off of them. And we're ready for some gravy and sausage for these. And I hope you've enjoyed this recipe. Very easy to do, and I will post the recipe for this. We took 3 cups of flour, a 1/4 cup of vegetable shortening, 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil. We took the flour and added to it, before the wet ingredients, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking powder. It gives them an additional lift, as you can see. And we mixed all that together with about 1 1/4 cups of buttermilk. Start off with 1 cup of buttermilk, and then add to it. And we rolled them out about 1/2 inch thick, and you can go thicker. But as you can see, they're beautiful. They're easy to do. Don't be intimidated. Try this recipe, and I encourage you to buy a local flour. It's fresher, it'll taste better, and you'll get better results. A lot of flour in these big mega stores have been sitting in a warehouse somewhere for 6 months, and the baking powder has lost its leavening power. And so by adding that extra baking powder, your biscuits will rise every time. You can pinch these off with your hands. You can cut them. But I hope you've enjoyed this recipe. And if you like our recipes, please subscribe to Suburban Appalachia channel. And we appreciate your time, and give this a try.